Welcome to The Explainer. We all think we know what a victim looks like. But what if that image in our heads is, well, completely wrong? Today we're going to dig into why some victims get all of our attention, while others somehow remain totally invisible. It's really a story about who our society chooses to see and who it chooses to ignore.
So let's just start right there. Seriously, take a second. When I say the word victim, who pops into your head? Is it a man? A woman? What's their story? That picture you just conjured up, that's at the very heart of everything we're about to unpack.
Because, see that picture in your head? It's not random. Not at all. It's been carefully built, piece by piece, a lot of the time by the media. And it creates this really powerful stereotype about who deserves our sympathy. But as we're about to see, this stereotype, it's often completely at odds with reality.
Okay, now look at this. This slide shows this massive gap between what we think we see and what's actually happening. On one hand, you've got the media, which often zeroes in on what some have called the missing white women syndrome, giving just a ton of coverage to cases that fit this very specific, narrow profile. But then you look at the actual data, and it tells a totally different story. Statistically, a young man from a working-class neighborhood is way more likely to be a victim of violent crime. Now, this isn't just some weird media habit. It has real life-and-death consequences for who gets justice and who gets forgotten.
So to really get why this gap exists, we have to look at this field called victimology. It's basically the study of who becomes a victim and why. And inside this field, there are two completely different ways of looking at the entire problem. And these two theories, they're not just slightly different takes. They represent a huge divide in how we even think about victims. They're not just offering different answers. They're asking completely different questions about where the responsibility for a crime really lies.
So here's the crucial difference. Positivist victimology looks at the individual. It asks things like, what did this person do to make themselves a target? Or what characteristics made them vulnerable? Now that can be useful for, say, crime prevention tips, but it gets a lot of criticism because it can get dangerously close to blaming the victim. But then you have critical victimology, which zooms way out. It looks at the bigger picture and asks, what's wrong with the system? How do things like poverty or the government's own power create entire groups of victims? It shifts the focus from the person to the power structures all around them.
And this brings us to a key idea from critical victimology. Sociologists call it the hierarchy of victimization. Think of it like a ladder. At the very top, you have the ideal victims, the sweet old lady, the innocent child. They get our sympathy, no questions asked. But way, way down at the bottom of that ladder, you have others, the homeless person, the sex worker. Their victimhood is often totally dismissed, or worse, they're seen as somehow being at fault.
Which brings us to a group that's often so far down this hierarchy, they just fall off it completely. And these are the victims of what researchers call safety crimes. People who are hurt or even killed, not by a criminal in a dark alley, but by a company's negligence on the job.
Just listen to this question. How do you get your voice heard when no one will let you? That comes from a mother whose child was killed in a workplace incident, and it was captured in the research of Dr. Katie Snell. I mean, it is just absolutely gut-wrenching. It perfectly captures that deep feeling of powerlessness these families have when they're silenced by the very system that's supposed to be there to help them.
And you know where that silencing starts? It starts with a single word, accident. Think about it. When a death is called an accident right from the beginning, well, it's not a crime. And if it's not a crime, there's no criminal. And if there's no criminal, there can be no victim. The whole idea of justice just gets erased before an investigation has even really started. Let's make this real. Look at the story of Sidney Rouse from back in 1988. He was given a bad map for a digging job. He hit a live electrical cable and suffered just horrific burns over 80% of his body. He died a week later. And the result? An official verdict of accidental death. The company? No manslaughter charges. Sidney Rouse's sister was left with nothing. The system basically said that her brother's death wasn't a crime. And for families like Sidney's, the death of their loved one is just the very beginning of this long, painful fight against a system that feels like it's designed to block them at every single turn.
In her research, Dr. Snell calls this journey a journey of suppression. And that word is so important. It's not just that the system is unhelpful, it's that it can actively work to suppress the truth and to silence the families who are fighting for it. They become an inconvenience, an obstacle to the company's story that nothing went wrong.
And this happens at every single stage, from the initial police investigation to the inquest, to the courts, and even the government's own health and safety executive. Each step can become another brick wall, another roadblock that ends up protecting the corporation and denying the family the simple recognition that they are victims of a crime.
But what happens when the system pushes you out? When you're told you're not a victim, when your voice is being suppressed? Well, you find other people just like you.
and you build a new system. You find your power by coming together. And that's exactly what happened. Starting in the late 80s, these families began to organize. Groups like Families Against Corporate Killers were created by these so-called secondary victims for each other. And their goal was really twofold. First, to provide the support that they never ever got from the state. And second, to fundamentally change how the world sees victims of corporate crime. They are fighting to make the invisible visible.
So, we end up right back where we started. Who gets to be a victim? And what we've seen is that the answer has a lot less to do with who is innocent and a lot more to do with who has power. It's decided by media stories, by legal jargon, and by corporate influence. But it is also being decided right now by the families and the activists who refuse to be silent, who are demanding that their loved ones be remembered not as accidents but as victims who deserve justice.